Get a lot of requests about advice for verbal. Just for if you haven't seen my MCAT story, just for a little background on my verbal, that is my strongest section, and I made on the old exam an 11, and on the new exam, the CARS section, I made 130. So a pretty good score. I was very happy with it. Unfortunately, the rest of my score wasn't that great, or I wouldn't be retaking it. So I get a lot of questions about how I got a 130 on the CARS section, and I thought I would give some advice on how to go about it. First thing is invest in a lot of CARS practice. I personally used the EK 101, Exam Crackers 101 Verbal Passages book for the first 2 times I took the test, and then this time around I'm using Next Steps 108 CARS passage practice. And the best thing you can do for your verbal score is to practice over and over and over and over and over. It is a skill that you can learn. It is a skill that you can get better at, but you have to practice. And the thing is, I can give you tips on techniques, which I'm going to, but there is not a perfect technique for everyone. You have to figure out what works for you and then use it and hone in your skills so that you can get the best score possible, because you want an extremely high verbal score, or CARS score, sorry, keep calling it verbal, because that's going to help your overall score, and you really don't want your overall score to be an average score and your sciences be fantastic because of your CARS score. So if you have a fantastic CARS score, it's going to help you out even better in the long run and help you to get into medical school. So first, invest in some practice. Second, start out doing untimed. Don't worry about timing, just start out doing some passages and getting used to it. I do about, when I'm starting out, 2 passages a day. And I don't put any stress on it. I just read it, and I don't try a specific technique when I first start. I do what feels natural to me. So I'm a highlighter. I love highlighting. So I highlight. But start out doing a technique that's natural for you. If you're reading a textbook and you know that you're gonna have questions on it, how do you approach that textbook? And then do the questions and see how you naturally do on CARS, whether you're naturally able to do it successfully, if it's just something that's natural to you, or if it's really something that you're not quite understanding. So after you do that for a couple times, just kind of get used to it. And when I start MCAT studying, I do CARS passages every single day of my MCAT study, unless there's days where I'm doing absolutely no study. Like if I'm starting to feel burned out, I'll take a Sunday off and just do absolutely nothing MCAT. And if I take a day like that, I don't do any CARS. But if I am MCAT studying, I do CARS every day. And I mean, I might break up my studying to where I do biology one day and physics the next day, but every single day I do at least 2 CARS passages. And it's just to kind of get in a routine of doing it, and it takes away the stigma of it and the scariness of it, of just doing it every day, to where it's so natural you don't even think about it. After you do those kind of a diagnostic, I would say, kind of do some verbal passages just to see how you naturally do without worrying about technique or timing or any of that. The next step would be to figure out your technique, and there's many different techniques out there, and a lot of MCAT study books will teach you different techniques, such as highlighting, such as note-taking, or skimming the passage, or reading the questions first. I don't recommend that one. Things like that. And you need to find what works for you, and it could be a combo of things. I like highlighting important terms and names and dates. So if it's anybody's name, if it's a date, if it's a term that's defined in the passage, if it's a formula, if it's, you don't really have those in the CARS, but in the regular science passages you do. If it's a very strong word, like always, absurd, a very opinionated word, something that is like, this is the author's opinion, because it's not a normal subjective word that you would use, or objective, so it's a subjective word, sorry. I'm really tired today. So any word that just screams out, this is an opinion, those I highlight. I also found the Kaplan approach early on in my CARS studying and kind of liked it. And I can get to the point now where I can do it without it, but it's kind of like waitressing, where you write down the orders and then you get to a point where you don't write down the orders. You have to write down the orders for quite a while to get used to being able to do it without writing it down. So it was a good technique to start off with, and that is to write a phrase after every paragraph summarizing that paragraph. So after every paragraph that I read, I would stop, I would think about what I read, what was the main point of that entire paragraph, because sometimes they're really long, sometimes they're really short, but what is the author using this paragraph to tell you? And I would write 3 to 5 words. I mean, I would short and sweet, you know, author hates physics. I don't know. This is bad for your health. You know, something just short and sweet that says this is what that paragraph is about. And in the next paragraph, I do the same thing, and I wouldn't take into consideration the paragraph I just read, the one before that. I would take in the one I just read and write only for that paragraph what the main point of that paragraph was in a phrase. And then when I got to the end of the passage, I would write one sentence that is the overall main idea of the entire passage. Look at each paragraph piece. How do they tie together? What's the main point that this author is trying to get across? What is the main opinion that this author has? What are they trying to convey in this passage? And I'd write one sentence on that, because a lot of questions are going to evolve around that main idea. And so that was a good thing for me. And the highlighting of the names and the dates and the terms are good, because some questions are detailed questions and you'll need to refer back to it. And if it's referring to Wadsworth in a passage about poetry, but you don't remember where the heck Wadsworth was, it's really helpful to have him highlighted, because then I know exactly where he is in the passage and what part of the passage he's part of. So that's my technique, is a short and sweet summary for each paragraph, and then a main idea for the passage, and then highlighting of key things. I don't know how detailed I want to get in this video of my CARS technique, but I guess I'll keep going. So the other thing is, with questions, if the question requires you to look something up, if it's something like, in line 5, the author said this, what did they mean by that? If it's something where it's a specific spot in the passage, then it's a good idea to go back and kind of just read around that spot. Like, oh, the ones that are like, okay, the author uses this word in paragraph 2. What did the author mean by that word? That's something where you need the context of it to figure it out. So look back in the passage. Otherwise, I try not to look back in the passage. I try to use my gut or my summaries. But if I need to, I will look back in the passage. It's just a time eater. The other thing is, with questions, the more you practice, and this is why I do passages every day, the more you practice, the more you're going to start to see patterns, and the more you're going to start to see what patterns they have in the questions and the answers, and it gets easier to predict what the MCAT wants you to say, because there's some questions where you can answer it and your answer's wrong, but you could argue your answer, like you could prove your answer is right, but it's not the MCAT right answer. So you need to start getting a feel for what they are looking for, because it doesn't matter if you think you're right, it matters if they think you're right. And you will start to see that the more and more and more you practice. So definitely work on that. And like, you start to notice answers that are too broad or too detailed. Stay away. You want something that you can prove 100% from the passage. If it's a very broad statement, or if it takes the main idea but it only takes part of it or a piece of it, or it elaborates too much, stay away from those. You want something that is absolutely provable by the passage. I could talk about CARS for days, so I'm trying to think in my head of what all I want to cover. So 1, get your resources. 2, work on your technique. And 3, timing. So this is a problem that a lot of people have, is running out of time on the CARS section. And that can be stressful. So when you first start doing your practice passages, like your 2 passages a day, don't do them timed. Work on your technique, get that figured out, get better at. When you start getting a little bit better at the passages, then start adding the time. And what I would do is I would time how long it took me to read a passage, and then time how long it took me to do the questions, and see which took me longer, because there's different pitfalls with each. And then I started out with 12 minutes a passage. And once I could get down to 12 minutes a passage, I went to 11 minutes a passage, and then I went to 10, and then I went to 9. Technically 10 minutes should be fine, but on test day you're going to be stressed, you're going to have an adrenaline rush. So if you can get down to 9 or 8 minutes a passage, that leaves you extra time, which helps you on test day if there's other things distracting you, like the stress of it or the adrenaline, or I'm hungry or I'm tired. You'll have that kind of wiggle room to help you with timing. So I try to get down to 9-minute passages, and I do this for individual passages when I'm first doing like 2 a days or 3 days. And you want to watch out for certain pitfalls and figure out where you're losing your time at. Are you spending too much time reading? Are you getting too focused on the details of the passage? The one thing about passage details it's really easy to get overwhelmed and confused by terms that you don't recognize or you don't even know what they're talking about. But the thing is, if they don't specifically define a term in the passage, you're not supposed to know it. If they don't specifically explain something, you're not supposed to know it. Nothing in the CARS passage is something that you're supposed to already have understood. So if there's details in there that aren't explicitly communicated on a common man's language, ignore it. They're not supposed to know it. It's just there as fluff to confuse the crap out of you. So if it's not in a common man language, it's not your job to know it. Ignore it. So just read a little bit faster through that stuff if it's not broken down, because it's not something that you specifically need to know. Another pitfall is looking up in the passage every time you do a question. That would make your question timing really long. If you're getting bogged down on the question. So you need to see where the majority of your time is spent. Is the majority of your time spent on reading the passage, or is it spent on the questions? And then work on fixing those pitfalls, because where your time is spent is going to dictate where your pitfalls are. I like to spend equal time on the passage and the questions, but again, it's up to you. If you're a really fast reader and you would prefer to spend your time on the questions, then work on that. And if you would rather read the passage thoroughly so that you completely understand it, and then you can fly through the questions because you understand what you read, then do that. Whatever works for you, but make sure that you find a technique and a strategy that gets you through the CARS section in the right amount of time and get you the most correct answers. And try out different techniques. Try out things. That's why you should get a big practice book that has a ton of practice. If you get the Next Steps 108 CARS passages, that's 108 passages for you to practice your timing, for you to practice your technique, for you to switch up your technique, for you to try new things. And it allows you the ability to practice and figure out what works best for you. And that's all that really matters. The other thing is, I said I do 2 passages a day. What I do is I take the amount of CARS passages that I have available to me. So for this round of MCAT, I have the Next Step 108 passages, and then I have the Next Step Strategy and Practice CARS book, which has, I think it was 48 passages, so I have 156. And I have 55 days to my MCAT. So take how many passages you have, take how many days you have, divide it, figure it out. So that's 2.8 passages a day, so about 3 passages a day. So what I'll typically do is I start out at 2 passages a day, I step it up to 3 passages a day, then I step it up to 4, then I step it up to 5. And then I work my way until I'm doing full-timed CARS sections before the MCAT. So I start off like 2 untimed, then I go to 2 timing it, and then 3 timing it, and then 4 timing it, and just work up until I can do full sections and getting scores that I want. Because like they say with practice exams, where you should keep doing them until you're getting consistently the score that you're aiming for, you need to keep doing CARS over and over and over until you're consistently getting the score that you're hoping for. And just keep doing it over and over and over. And then on test day, you're not going to be so stressed about it because you've been doing CARS every single day and it's like a walk in the park. So figure out your technique, get your resources, and work on your timing and kill it, and do it every single day. It's like working out. If you work out once every 3 months, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to feel like you're going to throw up, you're not going to be very fit or have really good endurance. You work out every day for a year, you're going to be ridiculously fit. So put in the time, put in the effort every day, and keep working on it. And y'all can kill it, and y'all can get 130s like me, which hopefully this time around I make 132. We'll see. But just keep practicing. If you have any questions or you want any help that's more specific, message me on Instagram at PreMedMomGetsFit.